It's the 10th anniversary of Over the Garden Wall, and if you haven't seen it, do yourself a huge favor, pause this video and go watch it because you're missing out. For those who have seen it, we can all agree that it's one of the best forms of media ever made. It has everything that you want from a show. There's a good mystery, it's spooky, it's adventurous, there's gorgeous artwork, it's totally wacky, absolutely perfect fall aesthetic, and the best part, it even has George Washington. So seriously, go watch this show. As you can tell by my costume that I definitely spent a lot of money on and didn't make right before this video, I'm a huge fan of the show. And given that it's the 10th anniversary and it's fall in New England, I needed to make some fan art. I've made some fan art for this show before, but I wanted to do something different, so I was really thinking about it, and then it finally hit me, and I think I landed on a pretty good idea. So come with me, let's go down to the corn maze and paint over the garden wall. Welcome to the beautiful cornfield where initially I was going to talk to the camera while I was painting, but I got really anxious because there was just a lot of cars that kept going by. Like I said, I have done an illustration for the show before, but this year I wanted to do something a little bigger and special because it was the 10th anniversary. And I wanted to push myself artistically because the last one I felt I played it a little safe. And I always thought that'd be really interesting, where you take a real life location and you add that fantasy and wonder to it. I started thinking about that idea a lot more and how I can apply that to Over the Garden Wall. And I really like the idea of taking my plein air skills and knowledge and applying that to these characters, where I take Over the Garden Wall elements and add them into a real life scene. I couldn't stop thinking about it and I really wanted to do it, but I really wanted to do it quick before all the leaves either fall off the tree or just turn brown. Which led to the next question, where? I'm lucky to live in an area where I'm just surrounded by nature and very picturesque New England scenes, but I felt like you couldn't just take any scene and put these characters into it. I wanted to make it thematically relevant, so I thought of adding a literal stone wall because New England has a lot of stone walls. And then I was like, that's a little too on the nose. And then I thought about going down to the train tracks because in the show, the train tracks are a very important element and storytelling device, which I thought was interesting. Then I settled on the cornfield, which I feel fits very perfectly for the narrative. I drive past this spot a lot and I'm just in love with the wide open field with the trees receding in the distance like that and the giant open sky. And I thought that fits the fall aesthetic of the show and the beauty and wonderful mystery that the show is also all about. You have the cornfield, which can be related to a certain episode in the show. I won't spoil it. And then you have, you know, the beautiful fall colors and whatnot. And I felt like there was a lot there that I can play with and not also get overwhelmed, because you have to remember when you're painting outside, you don't have forever. I mean, sometimes you do, but usually I don't. I'm not really good with time management. So I had 2 hours. So I didn't want something that I was going to get bogged down in details. I wanted something that I can focus more on the characters. So I felt like this setting added a beautiful backdrop, but it also fit narratively in the story itself. Once we get the pencils down and the inks, we can erase all of our line art because we don't want that showing up, and we can go in painting. Again, this is a pretty standard way of painting. I'm starting in the sky, where I'm taking that bead of water across, and I'm starting with French ultramarine blue with a little cobalt, and then I'm just adding more and more water and less paint as I'm going down to create more of that gradient and the washed out white sky at the bottom. I didn't have any tissues or paper towels, but I used the rag to, damp out the clouds, which I actually thought worked a lot better because it was way more absorbent, and I got that white, bright, fluffy cloud look pretty easily. I added a little Payne's gray at the bottom. This is something that I pull from the artist Paul Clark. I watch a lot of his videos, and Payne's gray is one of his most used colors. I think it makes a brilliant shadow color for any cloud, so that's kind of my mainstay too. Artistically, I started like every other plein air drawing I do. I do a really quick, loose sketch of just kind of the general area. However, this one I wanted to add more elements in the foreground. So there's actually a fence along this and just a bunch of bushes that aren't very attractive. So I added a hay bale, the pumpkin from that episode, you know, a corn stalk, and a split rail fence, which I felt worked as a better foreground, and it also added some details of the show which we can relate to. The best thing I added in the foreground was the little rock fact in the corner, which is kind of hard to see, but a true fan will know. Artistically, this got more technical for my drawings and my pencils because I drew the characters very loose, but then I wanted to define them a lot tighter with the pencil before I went into the inks because I didn't want to mess up. Pretty typical process where loose sketch, a little tighter of a sketch, and then I'm doing my inks with a micron. The foreground, I think I used a 12, which is like pretty big. That's a big boy. And then for the characters, I think I went in with a 5 or an 8 maybe. And then the distance I did like a 3. I don't know. I can't remember. To me, the drawing is my least favorite part. It's not that I hate it, but it's the most technical, and that's where you have to think the most because you really need to figure out where you're going to place all of your characters and the scene, and that's when your composition brain comes into play. But then inking is just kind of following what you just did, and then painting is the fun, expressive part. When you're painting in plein air and you are on a time crunch, aka the sun's going down and you got not a lot of time, you want to work smart. So that means you're gonna have to bounce around in ways that might not make sense if you're painting in your studio. For example, since I'm using watercolors, things obviously are wet and they take a while to dry. So you don't want to paint things that are next to each other and they might bleed and run together. That's not to say it's a bad look at all. If you like the runny and loose watercolors, that's perfectly fine. Sometimes I do paint loose, but for this, I wanted that tight, clean, things are in the line feel. So as a result, I bounced around and colored things as needed. Something that I always have a trouble with is I go too dark too quick, and I did the same thing with the trees. I wish I left a lot more air and life in the trees. I feel like I just kind of hit them really hard with these dark muddy greens and reds, which ultimately might make them a little too muddy, I guess. But you know, it still works. I think you still get what I'm going for. However, that's just something that I've always had a hard time doing, and it's something that I need to work on. But you know, everything's a learning curve. And one day maybe I'll stop making all my paintings muddy, but today is not that day. With painting the characters, it's a lot like how I bounced around the painting to not have them bleed together. I had to be careful because, you know, I couldn't risk that iconic red hat running into his face and maybe potentially losing all of that right there. I was very patient and I bounced around and filled things in as needed, and I worked on the rest of the painting while doing so. And here we are with our final piece. I really love it. I love how the colors work and it's clearly fall. I love the story elements of, you know, the rock fact, the pumpkin, the beast in the background. I think the scene overall really fits the show. I'm not saying that, you know, my art is as good as the artists on the show, but I feel like this could really be from the show. It feels like this scene could have really happened. This was a lot of fun to do because I had to push my brain in a lot of different ways. I had to really think as a plein air artist and think like a cartoonist, which was really tricky to do, but I love how it came out, and I really want to like take this concept and push it a lot farther. I would even take this illustration and push it a lot farther, but it got me thinking, I kind of want to do this more. So let me know, how do you think this came out? Is there anything I can improve on? What I can do differently? What characters would you want to see in this sort of drawing? Or even just comment below what's your favorite thing about Over the Garden Wall. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe. It really does help me out a lot, and I really do appreciate it. Until the next adventure, don't run into the beast.